All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Thank you for joining us to kick off Social Connection Awareness Week in Wisconsin. My name is Suzanne Morley. I'm a Health Promotion Program Coordinator with the Wisconsin Institute for Healthy Aging, or WEHA, and also the coordinator of the Wisconsin Coalition for Social Connection. So we're happy to partner today's webinar with WEHA's Age Well series to spread the message of connection throughout Wisconsin. And I want to start by thanking the Wisconsin Coalition for Social Connections Awareness Committee for helping to plan this week's events and activities. And just a few housekeeping pieces. All participants will remain muted during the presentation. If you would like to access live captioning, you can click on the CC icon on the bottom toolbar of your screen. This webinar is being recorded, and an email will be sent out to all registered participants after the presentation today. And then we'll have some time for Q&A after the presentation today, so please hold questions until then, but you can feel free to throw some thoughts or comments in the chat throughout. So as we get started, I just encourage everyone to drop your name and your favorite place to connect in your community into the chat. So we're talking a lot about community and connecting with other people today, so I encourage you to share that in the chat. And I'll just share my favorite place to connect in my community. I'd have to say probably my yoga studio and the local farmers market. Those are a few gems here. Before we get started, I'm going to just give a brief overview of WEHA, the Wisconsin Institute for Healthy Aging. WEHA is an organization whose mission is to improve the health and well-being of all people as we age. We encourage you to learn more about our evidence-based health promotion programs and initiatives on our website, and sign up for the Age Well series newsletter if you're not already. And a little bit about the Wisconsin Coalition for Social Connection. We're a statewide group of diverse partners, and we work to reduce social isolation and loneliness for older adults and people with disabilities throughout the state. And every year we host Social Connection Awareness Week, which is why we're all here today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Richard Kyte. Rick Kyte is a professor of ethics and director of the D.B. Reinhardt Institute for Ethics in Leadership at Viterbo University in La Crosse, Wisconsin. He writes a regular column appearing in over 70 newspapers nationwide and appears weekly on the Ethical Life podcast hosted by Scott Rada. He's a longtime member of the Rotary Club of La Crosse and serves on the boards of the Coulee Region Trout Unlimited, Leader Ethics, and the La Crosse Area Community Foundation. His latest book, Finding Your Third Place, Building Happier Communities and Making Great Friends Along the Way, was published in 2024. Rick, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Suzanne. I'm so pleased to be invited to speak with all of you today. I came out with this book on third places about a year and a half ago, and since then I've been traveling around the country and talking to different communities about the importance of social connection and especially the places where we connect. And it's really been eye-opening to talk to different communities and seeing what they're doing, and people like the question that you already answered in the chat: what is your favorite place to connect in your community? There's so much interesting stuff going on throughout the United States, and people really working hard to build healthier communities and finding more opportunities for people to connect, along with the growing awareness of just how significant this is for our well-being. There's also some really disturbing trends. And so I'm going to give you a message that I think is maybe equal parts optimism and pessimism, but also with then ending with some practical advice for what we can do. I want to start out with with a general question. Do you think lives today are better or worse than 60 years ago? And just think about that for a moment. I'm going to attempt a couple answers here. One answer is that objectively measured, our lives are incredibly better. And there's all kinds of evidence to support the fact that our lives are just much better than they were 60 years ago. The number of people worldwide living in extreme poverty is much, much less than it ever has been in human history. For most of human history, over 90% of the population all over the world lived in extreme poverty. That would be the equivalent of living on $1.20 per day in today's dollars. By 1950, that was down to around 70%. But today we're under 10% of people living in extreme poverty. So just that alone indicates that things are much better than they ever have been. We also find much lower rates of child mortality. This is the share of the population that dies in the first 5 years of life. In 1950, it was around 20%. That was amazing progress because it was about half of what the historical average had been. And yet today, in most countries, it's somewhere around 4 to 6%. And so that is a fantastic kind of global achievement that we've made because we've reduced poverty, we've improved agriculture, so people have more to eat than at any time in human history, and we've also made a lot of medical advances. Because of all that, life expectancy is going up. And so if you look prior to 1850, life expectancy throughout history was somewhere between 25 and 35, depending on where in the world you lived. And today it is anywhere from 60 to 80 plus. And the life expectancy continues to go up. And so this is a remarkable thing. And so if you were just going to ask yourself, if you were going to be born at any point in human history, when would you want to be born? It would probably be pretty recently because things are getting so much better. And yet there's some disturbing trends also. When we do worldwide surveys asking people how many think the world is getting better, very few people think so. And if you look at the countries listed on the bottom of this particular survey, France, Australia, Germany, Great Britain, Singapore, United States, 3 to 6% of the population reporting that they think that the world is getting better. Those are some of the most advanced, developed, prosperous countries in the world. And so the question is, why are people in the most advanced and prosperous countries feeling the worse about how the world is doing? And I think the answer is in rising rates of subjective unease. So we have a number of measures of subjective well-being. What I was looking at before when we were looking at poverty and child mortality and life expectancy, these are objective measures of our well-being. When we look at subjective measures, we can look at things like loneliness, depression, stress, anxiety. And all of those kinds of measures are getting worse and worse for as long as we've been measuring them. Now, there's only been systematic study of most of these measures since the latter part of the 20th century. So we have studies going back to about late 1980s to 1990. But we find, for example, that anxiety is going up and is going up considerably over the last few decades. And it's probably was going up before that. We find that social trust is declining, and it's declining quite a bit. If you look at 1960, around 55 to 60% of people said that they trusted other people. Now we're down around 30%. And actually, if we look at 2025 data, it's closer to 25%. We just don't trust our neighbors as much. And we certainly don't trust strangers as much as we used to. So the question is, if our lives are objectively getting better, why are we feeling worse? And there's a number of answers to this. I've been researching this now for probably 15 years, looking at all kinds of data. And what I've tried to do in this presentation is distill it down to just a few general answers. The most significant one is the effect of technology on our brains. We are living in a period of unprecedented technological development. And if we look back through history, human history, we find certain forms of technology that were quite profound in affecting our lives and in improving our lives, but they didn't come about every few weeks or every few months. They came about in the early part every couple of centuries, or maybe later every few decades. But we're living in a period of human history now where we get major technological developments on a regular basis. And they have profound effects, not just on the world or the environment, which they have profound effects on our social lives, because every form of technology, what it does is it allows us to have more power over something in the world or other people. And it allows us more independence or more freedom to do things that are a convenience. So if you think of something like smartphones, what they do, they allow you access to much more information and also in a way that is much more convenient. So it's very individualized. So all of these forms of technology, by giving us more power and more freedom, also affect our social relationships. And that's important because we are living with basically the same brains as our ancestors who lived, say, here in Wisconsin on the oak savannas 1,000 years ago. And our brains are really developed to make us anxious when there are external threats in our environment, and feel comfort or at ease when we know we're with a group of people that we can trust and we feel a part of. So we have inborn kind of incentives for belonging or connection. And as we develop more technology that makes us more independent from one another, we expand the rate at which we're exposed to external threats, and we decrease the extent to which we're interacting in ways that make our brains feel less anxious. And we can kind of see the way that we've changed how we think about ourselves in relation to others by looking at this. I was trying to figure out how do we know how far back these changes go in our social relationships? Because we've only been studying a lot of this in the last couple of decades. So I typed in a couple of words to the Google Ngram. This is something you can do yourself. The Google Ngram is a project of Google Books. It just lets you track the relative frequency of different words or phrases. And so here you can see is a scale from 1820 to 2000, so roughly 200-year period. What is the relative frequency with which the words self and friend appear in print? And what we see in 1820 is the word friend appeared in print about 3 times as often as the word self. By 2000, the word self appears about 3 times as often as the word friend. And they cross paths in around 1910. And so this doesn't tell us that we're necessarily becoming more selfish, but it does tell us that we're probably thinking more about ourselves than we are about friends, because that's the language reflects what we're thinking about. Now, why is that so important? Well, that to have friends, we have to spend a lot of time in investing in friendship. And what we find is that we're just not spending as much time as we used to. Now, if we look just over the past 3 decades or so, from roughly 2000 to 2025, what we find is that the amount of time spent by those 30 and up has been pretty much the same until about 2016, 2017. Then it started to decline. Took a real dip, of course, during the pandemic. It has climbed up a bit since then, but it's still about half of what it was prior to 2015. For younger age folks, it's declined much more precipitously. And so if you look at teenagers there from 14 to 18, they're spending much, much less time with friends per day. And as a consequence, we're seeing much higher rates of anxiety, depression, and loneliness among that group. So we're finding it over every age group, but especially among the young. Uh, because we're spending less time with friends, we seem to be forming fewer friends. This is a huge survey, the Survey Center on American Life. And, and what we find is between 1990 and 2021, there was a profound change in the United States in the number of friends that people reported. So in 1990, only about 3% of people reported that they had no close friends. By 2021, that's up to 12%. In 1990, there was 33% of people said that they had 10 or more close friends. This marker 10 or more, there's nothing magic about it. But it's a commonly used measure. Like people who have 10 or more close friends have a very robust social life. And so it's often used as an indicator of how strong social connections are for a person or for people within a community. What we find by 2021 is that we only have 13% of people reporting that they have 10 or more close friends. How do these two things work together? Well, if we're spending fewer hours with people, we're going to have fewer friends. And that's what seems to be happening all at every age group, and especially among the very young. People are just spending less time with others, and so they're not making as many friends. So if you look at how long does it take to make an acquaintance, well, only a few minutes. You introduce yourself to somebody else, and then you're an acquaintance. For a casual friend, it takes around 50 hours of spending time with somebody to just say that, yeah, this is somebody I consider a friend. So somewhere between 50 and 100 hours. But then to have a really good friend or a close friend, it takes 200 hours plus. That's a lot of time. Now, if you can imagine if at different times in your life you're very active in the community and you're spending a lot of time with other people over the years, that 200 hours is going to build up with quite a few different people. But as the number of hours that we're spending with others shrinks, we just don't have enough opportunity to make as many friends as we used to. So how does that affect our measures of subjective well-being? Well, what we're finding is it really affects the younger age group, say Gen Z, the most. And I'm taking this evidence from Jonathan Haidt, his book, The Anxious Generation. He's been researching this for quite a few years. And what we find is it really starts for that group around 2011, 2012. We find anxiety going up. It also increases for some millennials, but really for Gen X and for baby boomers, we don't find much of a change in anxiety. So the question is why? Why a profound change for younger people and not for older people in anxiety levels? That seems almost solely due to, I wouldn't say solely, but the major contributor is social media and smartphones. 2011, 2012, those are the first year that a majority of middle school kids had their own social media accounts and their own smartphone. And what happens is that it changes the way in which their relationships are mediated, and they're just not spending as much time then in face-to-face interaction with others. You also get a lot of people who are baby boomers who are using smartphones and social media beginning around the same time, and yet it doesn't affect their anxiety levels as much. And that seems to be because they're using social media differently. For many people, in that baby boomer generation, um, social media is used largely to connect with other people, to see what's going on in the community, to see what's going on, say, with family members, to share photos and stories, that sort of thing. But what it does is it serves somewhat to enhance existing social relationships, not to replace them. And where you get the really negative effect is when the social media use replaces actual relationships. We don't have as many studies as we would like of how kids are spending time differently, but we do have a study going back in the UK back to 1975. What we find is, yeah, screen-based activities have been increasing steadily, um, um, beginning with television and then computers and things like Game Boys, and to now it's smartphones and iPads. Also spending more time on sport and homework. That's all good, but much less time socializing outside of the home and much less time in outdoor play. And those are really important because they are the unstructured kinds of activities that are really conducive for building relationships. So why is that so important? Why is social connection? And it's vitally important for every age group. First of all, for our mental health, what we find is that those who report that they have 10 or more close friends are overwhelmingly likely to describe themselves as succeeding or thriving. Whereas those who say that they have no close friends are really likely to describe themselves as distressed or struggling. And so this is a widely used mental health quotient score. And what you find is that the more friends you have in general, the more you tend to be doing well or describe yourself as doing well. Social connection's really important for preventing dementia. And this is a study that came out in the journal Nature Aging. It's a really massive study looking at all kinds of data that we have from around the world linking dementia rates with levels of social participation. And what we find is that greater social participation in midlife and later is associated with a 30 to 50% reduced dementia risk. This is significant because it's a greater, seems to be a greater contributor than anything else. And that's important because if we look at the projections, we're looking at worldwide of dementia rates doubling in the next 25 years or so. And so probably the most important thing we can do is encourage more social interaction among seniors as a way of reducing that risk. It's also important just for survival. This comes from Robert Putnam. He's the author of a really well-known book called Bowling Alone, in which he was looking at civic engagement in the United States for the 5 decades at the end of the 20th century, from 1950 to 2000. And looking at all that data, one of the most striking things he discovered is if you don't belong to anything, just joining one club reduces your chance of dying in the next year by 50%. This is due to a number of different factors that social connection plays in our lives, but some of them it just improves, for example, our mental health, which we just looked at. It also improves our cardiovascular health, but it also gives you people to contact in case you are in a crisis. And I had a really great example of that just recently. A woman I know who goes to the Y and does water aerobics at the Y a couple of times a week told me last winter that she got a phone call from another woman who's in the water aerobics group, asking if she could help her out. Had been a snowstorm, her driveway hadn't gotten shoveled out, and she lived in a trailer home on the outskirts of town. She needed to get to the pharmacy for her heart medication, and she wasn't able to get out of the house. And so this woman came and was able to shovel her out, pick up her medication, and get it to her. But then visiting with her in her home, she told her that she was so relieved she didn't have anybody else to call because that was the only group that she belonged to. And so this joining at least one group or one club really is important for us because it gives us a network of people that we can rely upon. Some of the other things that Putnam found, which I found just fascinating, comes from his book Bowling Alone. And so the data is a little bit old. It goes back to 1998. But these are social capital measures of the different states in the United States. Social capital index is a score that indicates what is the state of social connection within the state. And so those states with the higher scores, and you look in on the right-hand side of this graph here, what you see is states like North Dakota, Vermont, South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, Washington. These are the states with relatively high social capital scores. They also have high scores in the social kids count, in the kids count index, which is a well-known measure of children's welfare. And if you look at states with really low social capital scores, they tend to score really low in children's well-being. If you look at educational outcomes, again, states with high social capital, here's Wisconsin right up here, tend to have really good educational outcomes. And that seems to be due to a number of different factors. One of the big ones is when you have really high rates of social connection, you have better parental involvement. And schools are more connected to their communities. Where you have low social capital, you have low educational outcomes. And then finally, if you look at violent crimes, and this is the mean murder rate, and what we find is states with high social capital have low murder rates. States with low social capital tend to have higher murder rates. That holds true for all kinds of other crimes as well. So the question is, if the lack of social connection is the principal reason we're feeling worse about our lives, and it's vitally important for our well-being, what can we do about it? And these are really the 5 things that I boiled it down to. One is emphasize real experiences. We have all kinds of opportunities to engage in entertainment in our home right now. We have all kinds of streaming services, and we have laptops and iPads, and you can keep yourself entertained and active within your home with all kinds of virtual experiences. As tech companies are developing even more sophisticated programs with AI and so forth, there's going to be even more possibilities for that. But what you need is real experiences. So emphasize getting outside of the home and do it with real people. Don't try to rely on chatbots or digitally mediated experiences for your feeling of belonging or well-being. Find opportunities to actually get outside and engage with real people. Third is prioritize friendship. Think of friendship as an investment that you make over a long period of time. And it's just like investing in your finances, in your, I'm sorry about that. I accidentally hit the advance. Think about investing in friendship just the way you would want to invest in a 401k. You put a little bit into it continually over the years until you build up a pretty healthy fund of friends. Fourth is become a joiner. I talk to people all the time that say, well, I'm just not a joiner. And my response is, being a joiner isn't a personality trait. It is just something you decide to do. And you don't even have to like it necessarily, but just join some kind of group. That's the fastest way to make social connections, is just join some kind of club or group. And then finally, we need to encourage our civic leaders to fill our communities with third places. We need our communities to think of social places to connect, as one of them, as more important than streets and all the other things that communities invest in. We need to invest more in where we can gather, where we can meet. So what are third places? These are the places outside of home and work where we make connections with others. Libraries, cafes, coffee shops, churches, parks, gyms, taverns, any place where people are gathering on a regular basis. That can be a third place. So it can be much more than just what I've listed here. Just because something fits in that list, though, doesn't mean it's a third place. This is a story I came across fairly recently in the LA Times listing the best coffee shops in LA. And here's the photo that went along with the story. And it might be a really good coffee shop because they serve good coffee, but there's not a single person in there talking to anybody else. And the key characteristic of third places is it's places where people are interacting and they're having conversation. There are a lot of unusual third places, and there's more popping up all the time. This is a Yemeni coffee shop in Milwaukee. Yemeni coffee shops have become really significant, especially in bigger cities where they're located, because they don't serve alcohol, but they're open late at night. And so they become really popular gathering places for people that want to have a nighttime hangout, but don't want to go to a bar. Thrift stores have become really popular third places. And a lot of people are gathering in them. They're popping up all over the country. But they're places where people will just go, not just to shop, but also just as a place to meet some other people and have conversations. Farmers markets are great at gathering people together. And pickleball courts. Pickleball is now the fastest growing sport in America. And I think a big reason for that is that it is so social. There's a lot of social activity that takes place, and it is also intergenerational. And then finally, bookstores are really interesting third places. Did you know that the number of independent bookstores in the United States has doubled in the past 10 years? And that's largely because these independent bookstores are reinventing themselves as event places, not just as a place to buy books, but places to come and meet people and talk about things that are important to us. And so a lot of people go to these bookstores just to hang out. And I've been visiting a lot of them around the country over the past year, and it's remarkable how much social interaction is taking place in many of them. And so finally, this is a wrap up. Just finally, if you want to find a third place, but you're not sure how to do it, think about the things you like to do and ask yourself, where do other people who enjoy those things hang out? And that can be just about anywhere, not necessarily the places I listed, but it could be dog parks. It could be the YMCA. It could be the public library. It could be a cafe. Also look for places that are convenient and accessible to you. And talk to a few people you know from your work or neighborhood, and ask them if they would like to get together. If you can't find a club or a group to join, and you're not sure where to go, one of the things you have to realize is there are all kinds of people just like you who are looking for more social connection and aren't sure where to go. And so they're waiting for an invitation. And so it is really easy to start your own group with just two or three people getting together to have coffee or a drink or go to a bookstore or something like that. Um, Bookstores and public libraries are also really good resources to ask about not just book clubs, but also kinds of clubs or groups that are in your community if you're not sure where to go. And then finally, make a commitment to show up regularly. You build social connection not by just going to a bunch of one-off places, but uh, going to something on a regular basis where you put it on your calendar and you show up repeatedly, because it takes repeated hours of interacting with the same people for us to expand our range of friendships. So that's the end. And I would love to take some questions if you have any. So I'll stop the share here so I can see you, and I'll let Suzanne moderate the conversation.
Perfect. And before we get into Q&A, everyone wants to start thinking of questions and throw them in the chat. I'm just going to share a few slides. Oh, thank you, Rick, for your great presentation. If you want to be entered to win a copy of Rick's book, Finding Your Third Place and Making Great Friends Along the Way, don't hesitate to fill out our Zoom survey. It'll pop up as we end this webinar. It'll open up in your browser automatically. So fill out that survey if you want to win a copy of his book. And we thank our sponsor, TMG, for sponsoring the purchase of his books. We have 10 to give away, so we're really excited to be able to share it. And then a couple other things. We have Social Connection Awareness Week bingo. So we encourage everyone to get out your daubers and participate in bingo. I printed off my bingo card earlier this morning. It's sitting on my desk. So we encourage everyone to complete some of the suggested connection activities, or even make your own. Maybe you could have Find Your Third Place on here as an activity. But complete at least one bingo or try for a blackout and show us how you connected. We have a little Google document if you want to take a picture of yourself doing one of the activities. We would love to see that so we can see the spread of social connection this week in Wisconsin. And finally, just a couple of things coming up. If you are interested in continuing the conversation about social connection, we have another webinar on Friday of this week. We'll have a panel discussion on some different programs and activities that impact social connection for older adults and people with disabilities Friday morning. And then if you're here as part of an AgeWell series participant and you regularly attend WeHa's AgeWell series, we have another event coming up on Tuesday, December 9th, related to medications and falls. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and check out the chat. So Sheila and Rick asked a question, where do come in? Not sure if you're able to answer that one, Rick.
Could you say that again?
The question is, where do pets come in?
Where do pets come in?
Yeah.
Yeah, pets are fantastic because they they give you all kinds of opportunities for having conversations where people wouldn't talk to you otherwise. So when you're taking walks around neighborhoods, it is real common for somebody to stop and want to pet a dog or something. So I think you're probably asking two questions. One is how do pets affect our our kind of our mental well-being? And they have a profound effect because they act like friends. But even more importantly, I think, is that they expand our range of social connections with other people. It's really important if you have a pet to make sure the pet is socialized well. So you want a pet that allows you to interact more with others and doesn't keep you from interacting with others. But then I think like dog parks are really fantastic, and also just taking walks in neighborhoods.
Yeah, Megan threw in the chat, they encourage talking to strangers, which is definitely true, especially if you have a really, really cute puppy or a small puppy. Those are my favorites to come across.
Oh, my dog died just a couple years ago, and I haven't gotten another dog yet. But it was really amazing how many people would come by and ask where our dog was. People who didn't know my name knew our dog's name from the neighborhood. So they're really great for getting to know people.
Definitely. Another question in the chat, how do we encourage those who are most isolated and happy to be isolated to come and connect? Do you have any tactics?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are isolated and sometimes say happy to be isolated, but I think they're maybe resigned to be isolated or have developed a habit of being isolated and are not necessarily happy with it. There's a lot of people that need real kind of persistent personal invitations. And what we also find is that we have really increasing rates of social anxiety. Just telling somebody to come and show up, say, to a group or to an event, this can be really difficult for somebody who doesn't have a lot of regular social interaction. And so realize that sometimes people will need invitation to something where they know exactly who is going to be there and it's not going to be too many people and they kind of know what the expectation is of them. So they're not just walking into kind of a unanticipated kind of levels of expectation. So personal invitation, but then also like with real predictable kinds of social interactions are important.
Thank you for that. Katie put in the chat, increasing the trust factor beyond 25%. And I'm not sure if that's a question of how to do that, or Katie, maybe if you want to expand on that, or Rick, if you have any comments on it.
Well, I mean, yeah, so this really, it's a bad thing for our society because this is one of the things that leads to more polarization when we have lower levels of trust. And how do we expand it? I think it's mainly just we need to have people out interacting with more because the more we interact with other people, the more we start to think that the people what we haven't interacted with are just like the ones we have. And so this is one of the biggest things we can do to increase social trust is you just increase social engagement at the local level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Katie clarified that seems like where it all starts is increasing trust.
Yeah.
A couple comments about what we've kind of talked about. See that a lot in rural central Wisconsin, anxiety about going out, not knowing who will be there. Tracy has a question about, she's curious about, or they're curious about the intersection of trauma and willingness or not to seek out social connections and the possible dilemma of this.
Yeah, so yeah, I think so people who've had trauma can oftentimes have also corresponding higher rates of social anxiety or maybe more suspicion or skepticism about joining different kinds of groups, but then they need that doesn't mean they don't need it. Um, uh, like pretty much so when I show you the overall data, like what do we need for our mental well-being and that idea of 10 or more close friends? Not everybody needs 10 or more close friends, but it turns out everybody needs some. And so that becomes really important. And I think you just more patience and more encouragement with some people to find opportunities. I'll give you an example. I'm in a regular coffee group. We gather every Wednesday morning. And I started that group about 15 years ago, just with two other people, just three of us getting together in the mornings for coffee. And we had a couple more people got invited to join us over the years. One of them was somebody that I didn't know, but who was really difficult to get along with. Well, it was somebody who worked in a really high stress job, had a lot of responsibility, and just because of their work life, had a lot of negative interactions with people. And he would bring that into our coffee group, and it was difficult. In fact, we lost one other member, just couldn't stand being with this person. Then this person retired a couple of years later, and what I realized is we were the only social group he had. And And he would start texting people the night before we'd gather for coffee to see if everybody was going to be there. Well, there was no need to text because we were doing it every week, but he just wanted that reassurance because he looked forward to it so much. And I realized for the first time that here was somebody that it was very difficult for him to socially engage at first. But he desperately needed it. He needed that regular connection. And as the years went on, he's been with us now for about 10 years. He's come to be a really good friend. But I'd have to say for the first year, I couldn't stand him. I mean, when we talk about, say, somebody who's had trauma or somebody who's had a really difficult experience, they're not always pleasant to be around either, but you have to have patience with people. Just about anybody can become a friend if you spend enough time with them and get to understand them, and they get to understand you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I always think of like you never know what someone else is going through. So having patience, I think, is a good lesson.
Yes.
Megan has a question. Full-time work hours are fundamentally in the way of more socialization, both logistically and energy-wise. Are you aware of any policies that show promise in other countries related to that?
Well, I mean, some other countries will have limits on the number of work hours, more vacation time, that sort of thing. But the most significant ones, the countries where we find really high levels of social engagement, what they really do is um, they invest in in places like their towns and cities and so forth. They make sure that social gathering places can can be close to neighborhoods so that when you come home from work, you don't have to think about going out and driving for 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes in order to get to a place to interact with people. It's just down the street. Um, and so it doesn't take nearly as much time and it's much more convenient. So that's one thing that other countries do a much better job of than we do. And another is just culture of emphasizing social engagement. And America is well known for this. We have really emphasized a culture of individualism. And I think it would be healthy for us to emphasize uh, friendship as well.
Another question in the chat from Michael. How does finding third places assist vulnerable people from being scammed by the unscrupulous?
Yeah, so we find like well, there's so many more scams than there used to be, and we have programs and government agencies who are working hard to help people not fall victim to scams. But it turns out one of the best ways not to fall victim to scams is just have uh, people that you talk over. You have a lot of friends and you're in regular conversation with them, and so you get a phone call from somebody who they wants to do some home repair and you're not sure about them, and you have people that you can talk to about this, and some friend can tell you, "Oh, I got the same call," right? And you find out like, yeah, that's a scam. We find people that have really robust social connections just um, do not do not fall victim to scams at nearly the same rate.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. So friendship can be like a protective factor against scams.
Yep. Yep.
Sheila and Rick have a question. What about concerns about COVID or health concerns in getting together in groups?
Well, yeah, so you want to be safe, of course, and that's something that different kinds of groups will do, and yet also like building up regular resistance, I think is a healthy thing, and so having some level of social interaction is not a health danger; it's a health protection. The other thing is that when we find people that have higher rates of loneliness and social isolation, they might not be exposed to as many pathogens, but they also don't have as robust of immune systems. And so the having good cardiovascular health, which is really closely tied to social engagement. This is very important too.
Mhm, definitely. Karen shared that sometimes attending a larger event is easier for people who are anxious about socially interacting. What can large group organizers do to draw those people into engaging?
Yeah, so insofar as possible, have large events, but then have opportunities for interaction within the event.
Mhm.
Um, one of the things that I did, I've been doing this fall, is I've been hosting a lecture series in which I, instead of arranging the room so everybody is facing forward for the event, just arrange it in tables so everybody comes in and they sit around a table. Um, there's a lecture part of our education series at Viterbo. But then there's about a 10-minute time for discussion immediately following the lecture at a table. And then we open it up for the larger group discussion. And so this gives people the kind of both. They have opportunity just for going and attending an event, a small amount of discussion, but it isn't overwhelming in that they aren't expected to share a great deal over the course of a whole hour. Um, and then we're done in about an hour. So just experimenting with different arrangements where people interact in different ways, and then do it in a way that kind of optimizes both comfortability and social interaction.
Mhm. Yeah, and Kathy had a comment in the chat. I think a lot of it depends on the wording of the invitation. Do you want to ride together? Should we meet at the door? I'll walk in with you, etc.
Yeah, that's great.
And Carol has a question. How has work from home affected this lack of connection?
Yeah, work from home has really hurt because so Americans especially have worked more than just about people in just about any other country. There's some countries where people work longer hours. Um, and it as we've find reduced social interaction outside the home, it turns out that the workplace is the number one way in which people form friendships outside of family and pre-existing small friendship circles. And so as people work from home, we find their social interaction really declines for the most part. So then it becomes even more important for mainly to join a group. I think you see, joining a group, I emphasize that so much because that is something that commits you to getting outside of the house. Just like working outside of the house does, you have to show up every day. Joining a group where you have to show up at least once a week somewhere gives you a commitment.
Mhm. I love working from home, but I also just recently started bartending to get myself out of my house and talking to people. I've been really enjoying that.
That's great.
Yeah. Megan's been sharing a lot of great resources in the chat. So feel free to click on some of the links that Megan has shared, but she's also working to identify specific suburban zoning codes and would be interested in talking to other people who are interested in the built environment as a social connection helper. So looking more of that systems, environmental change. See some love
Yeah.
for the
We're seeing a real renewed interest now. I would say, in the last decade of cities reviewing zoning codes and trying to find ways of increasing opportunities for connection within neighborhoods. And so that's a really welcome change.
Mhm. Kathy shared some love for the table idea that you shared, Rick, and Megan shared that she's more connected to her neighbors because she works from home, which makes sense. Maybe
Well,
give them
for
donuts.
somebody I mean, yeah, could be an upside of working from home is that you use the opportunity. You don't have the commuting time, and so then you can spend more time on social activity outside of home or work. Unfortunately, most people don't do that. But if you can, that is good for you.
Definitely. We have a few more minutes for questions. I see one more and see some love for the men's shed movement. So definitely encourage checking that out. We'll actually have a participant of the men's shed in Juneau County on our Friday webinar. So if you're interested in learning more, check that out. But another question from Dan. For building owners, do you have any advice on how to best launch a third place successfully?
Yeah, so there, I it depends on the kind of place you're looking at doing. Is it, is it a bar or a cafe or a coffee shop or whatever it is? But like one thing is of whatever the kind of place that you are launching, make sure that you go to a bunch of similar kinds of places. So if it's a coffee shop, go to a bunch of coffee shops, go to a bunch of bars, whatever it is, and look at the ones that have already been in existence that do a really good job of creating like different size intimate spaces within those buildings because what just pay attention to how people are interacting and what is conducive to conversation and what is not. The biggest mistake I see in many places that open up, say a cafe, is that it's a big open room and people want edges or corners of things where they can gather and have a discussion with small groups, say from some 3 to 6 or 7 people. And are there places where a group can do that without sitting in the middle of a noisy room and actually have a conversation, hear one another? Places that have a lot of those kind of corners and edges and things like that, they tend to really attract small groups of people.
Mhm. And I know you talk about that a little bit in the beginning of your book. So again, putting a plug out to fill out our survey if you want an opportunity to win a copy of Rick's book. Thanks again to TMG for sponsoring the purchase of those books. A couple more minutes for questions. I do see Megan just threw in the chat that Milwaukee just approved accessory dwelling units. And Kathy shared so many places are so loud that it's hard to hear. So I definitely second that. So those little corners are appreciated for sure.
So here's another thought. It's interesting. I just had a discussion with a group of graduate students at the University of Quebec in Montreal were doing a study on how they create a third place within the neighborhood where the university is. And one of the things that they had not considered at all was how friendly is the host. Really successful third places have a host who knows people's names and welcomes them and learns what they like and makes them really feel welcome. So it's partly building design, but it's partly just practicing hospitality.
That's a good note. Elizabeth just shared Appleton's new library is an amazing building that has done a great job of creating third spaces, and a link to check that out. So definitely check that out. I'll try to share some of the links in the chat with a follow-up email. I'm not seeing any more questions. I'm going to share one more slide here if you're interested in staying connected or getting connected with the Wisconsin Coalition for Social Connection. Check out our website. Feel free to shoot us an email. Sign up for We Has Age Well series newsletter. And again, the recording will be sent out and then within the next day or so. So again, thank you so much, Rick. Do you have any last minute things you'd like to share?
I think I've shared everything. Go out yourself and invite others. You'll just feel so much better. Thank you. This has been a pleasure to talk to all of you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rick. And we'll hopefully see everyone back Friday for our wrap up for Social Connection Awareness Week. Have a great day, everyone.